There's a new pope in town, that town being Vatican City, and the world's 1.5 billion Catholics are ecstatic. Robert Prevost, now Pope Leo the 14th, is the first pope born in America. Although I feel like I don't need to point this out, it was pretty obvious when he came out onto the balcony of St. Peter's with a Smith & Wesson strapped to his hip. Vatican City has already opened a McDonald's, and the Pope's first order of business was declaring Super Bowl Sunday a new Catholic holiday. Now, I don't know what kind of Pope Leo is going to be, although I have my suspicions, but I can say this. I'm excited to watch the first American Pope make the Vatican great again. I'm Tyler Chrestman. Welcome to the Chrestman Conversation. Okay, welcome in, everyone. I have a good show lined up for you for the day. We have two of our topics. We have three topics. Two of them are very related to one another. We're going to go over two separate ugly incidents that were just big in the news cycle this week. We have a woman in Minnesota who called a little boy the N-word. Dave Portnoy vows to ruin the lives of some college kids who put up a fuck the Jews sign in his bar, excuse the language. And then we're going to talk about the new pope at the end, a little thing to cheer us up, hopefully, towards the end, because these first two stories are just kind of ugly and gross. We don't like them. But first, before we get to that, my favorite comment from last week, we have at Chia49504, who said, quote, "Could you be more clueless?" 3 question marks at the end of that one, end quote. I wrestled with this question, Chia. It's a great question. And the answer is yes. I could absolutely be more clueless. I could be a Democrat. Thanks for the comment. Moving on. Topic 1, some racism in the park. As always on the show, we try and do details first. We start with the details of the incident, then we talk about why we're talking about the incident in the first place, why it was in the news cycle, why it's important, blah, blah, blah. We do all that. But we always like to start with the indisputable facts first, and then we go into analysis. I feel like this is important because a lot of people don't know. They hear about stories, or you see headlines, you hear someone else tell you about it, but you don't know the things that everyone agrees happens. And sometimes there's dispute, but for the most part, what we try to focus on are the things that everyone kind of is in agreement happened, and then you can analyze those details in different ways. And that's where your slant in the media comes in. It's not that they report the facts wrong. That's not it. It's that they analyze, interpret those facts, and then give you the analysis as fact. That's not what we're trying to do. What we try and do is facts first, analysis later. So, facts of this case that we're going to talk about. There was a woman who we're not going to name. I'm not interested in doxing her or shaming her or anything like that. There's no point. I don't know. This person should never be a national figure, and I think it's stupid that she is. And the same with the guy who we'll talk about in a minute. But a woman who we're not going to name, a white woman, lives in the city of Rochester, which is up in Minnesota. I think they said it's 40 miles south of Minnesota. 90 miles south of Minnesota, something like that. 45 minutes maybe from Minnesota. I can't remember. But, or Minneapolis, I mean. So it's a city of Rochester. She is in a local park. She's there. She caught this 5-year-old black boy who was rifling through her diaper bag. Now, according to her, previously some stuff had been stolen out of her bag at a separate incident in the park. So when she caught this little boy rifling through the diaper bag, she kind of lost her mind. She sounds like she called him a racial slur. We don't have the exact quote, but we know that the N-bomb was dropped, okay? The Hiroshima of verbal ticks was dropped, and everyone lost their mind because she obviously said this very hateful thing to this little boy. Now, I don't know if the parents of the little boy say he has some sort of, he's either autistic or he has some sort of developmental delay, and that he wasn't trying to do anything bad, but he was rifling through a purse. Doesn't matter. You really control your kids. But don't call little children hateful slurs either, okay? I think that's safe to say. So anyway, she calls this little boy the N-word. A man, and here was another confusing part about this story that initially was reported a couple different ways. One said it was the boy's father, another said it was his guardian, and it doesn't matter. His relationship to the boy in this part of the story is actually irrelevant. Doesn't matter if it was his dad. Doesn't matter if it was his guardian or brother or cousin or just some random stranger. A man then began filming the woman. He followed her through the park, confronting her about the incident. The woman flipped him some double birds, doubled down on the racism, apparently dropped a couple more N-bombs. I actually, myself, I didn't watch the video. I'm not really interested. What I was reading is other commentaries. I don't really want to watch a video like this. I think it's dumb. But I saw enough. I saw little bits of it. And so what you see is a man following a woman through the park. She's yelling racial slurs at him and flipping him off. And that's kind of the incident. She gets in a car, drives away. So what you see, or why is this story important? As I guess, why are we talking about this ugly incident that happens in this park? And I think the reality is we're talking about it because in the last decade, and really it's been, you could think about it about, I guess it's been about 13, 14 years now. So we'll say 15, just to be on the safe side. For the past 15 years, what we have seen in America is a return to racial politics in a way that for a couple decades was not really talked about in the same way. You saw little bits of it, little bits of racial politics that popped up when they were talking about the disparity between crack and cocaine sentencing in the justice system, when it came to the OJ trial, when it came to Rodney King. You saw these things pop up. But basically, from the 90s through the 2000s, you had this 20-year period where racial politics in America was kind of at the best point it had ever been. And then Barack Obama's second time running for president came. So basically from the 2008 to 2012 cycle, some point in there, the politics in America turned back into a racialized politics. Now look back to when Barack Obama ran in 2008. What you actually didn't see a lot of was racial politics leading up to the election. There was some of it, but not in the way that we're used to today, 15 years later. What you see is Barack Obama actually moved away from any of the radical racial politics of the day, and he would do this speech. He'd say, there's no white America, there's no black America, there's just America. And he would do this thing where he acted like everyone's just an American, and we needed to push racial politics to the side. Well, that pivot happened when he ran for office the second time. And he started, that was when you had Trayvon Martin that popped up, and you had a couple racial incidents that were elevated to a way that they weren't elevated before because Barack Obama was president. And I'm not blaming Barack Obama for this, but his reaction to them actually fed back into racial strife that kind of boiled under the surface for 20 years, and it allowed it to become mainstream again. So then what you have from post-2012 on, this really started, the racial divide that you see today in politics really started to accelerate in 2014 with the shooting of Michael Brown here in St. Louis, in Ferguson, Missouri, and with the birth of Black Lives Matter movement. This was when we started a new era of racial politics in this country that from the beginning, if you look back on any of the stuff that I wrote, whether you're talking about Colin Kaepernick or Black Lives Matter or any of this, I wrote, and at the time when I was writing this, I would have considered myself a liberal. I would have considered myself, I still voted Democrat for Hillary Clinton in 2016. So I would have been a person I was critiquing the left from what I thought was a place on the team where I said, hey, I don't think this is actually going to work to win people over to the Democrat view, because I think that this racial politics, one, is not based in data, and two, it just you're going to create a pushback from the other side. What I mean is, if black people in America form together and have a racial consciousness, they have a racial politics, what you're going to see, with not for any other reason other than it's just the natural course of events, you're going to see a white consciousness begin to form. When you say it's okay, you're proud to be black, you're proud to be Asian, you're proud to be Native American or Hispanic, but then you say, well, you can't be proud to be white. It's ugly. It's gross. We don't need this. You shouldn't be proud to be anything. You shouldn't be proud to be black. It's not an accomplishment. You shouldn't be proud to be white. It's not an accomplishment. It's not anything that you did. It doesn't matter. The skin color of a person should not matter, period. But when you pretend that it does on one side, you're going to see it pop up on the other side. And this was what I always have said for the last 12, 15 years, is that you will watch a white identitarian politic take hold in America in a way that it hasn't in a while. And that's how you wind up with these elevated incidents. It's not that white people are becoming more racist. I don't think that's true. But white people get annoyed with the way that race is talked about in America because the only thing you're allowed to say about if you're white is that you're sorry. Oh, white privilege exists. Life is easier for you. Everything is handed to you. You have to apologize for the transgressions against the past. The white people are the only people who have ever done anything evil in the world. And I think people get sick of this. And because they get sick of this, you're going to see a pushback. I've always thought this was ugly. Any racial politics, I want nothing to do with it. I don't belong to a team of white people. And you, if you're another race, shouldn't feel as though you belong to a team of people just because they look like you. There are a lot of white people in this country. I don't have things in common with the majority of them. The fact that we're white is irrelevant to me. It doesn't mean anything to me because whiteness is not an identity. It's not as though being white means everyone has something in common. We don't. White people come from a variety of different cultures. Look at Europe. They don't speak the same language. They don't behave the same way. Western civilization has some general cultural norms that most societies possess, but none of them behave the same way. Again, if you don't even speak the same language, you don't share a culture. You can't say that. You don't share a history. The Italians don't even share a history with themselves. There were like 18, 20 city-states in Italy before it became a unified country. The Italians themselves don't share a history. So it's impossible to say that because you share a characteristic, it is important. So this lady in the park, the reason why this is a national story is based on over a decade of racial politics being pushed to the front of our news media, and it just divides. That's all it does. None of these stories bring people together. Michael Brown was a criminal. He was shot by a police officer. He was cleared. There were multiple autopsies done, multiple investigations from the department, the state, the federal government. Everyone determined the same set of facts. Michael Brown robbed a store. There was an APB put out for someone who looks like him. He was stopped and questioned. He fought a police officer. He grabbed the gun. A shot was even discharged in the car from the police officer's gun when Michael Brown grabbed it. Then there was a scuffle. Michael Brown was shot multiple times in the front. None of this. He was on his knees. His hands were in the air. Hands up, don't shoot is one of the biggest lies ever told. Or he was shot in the back running away. None of this was ever true. So the entire Black Lives Matter movement was based on this giant lie. And then for 15 years, we've had to pretend as though it's a real thing and we can talk about it. And the answer is no, it's not a real thing. It's not real in the way that people pretend it is. And all it does is create things like this. Anyway, we got to get back to the topic. This woman in the park, that's the reason why it's a national news story. It's not because ugly personal incidents should be elevated and people's lives should be ruined. No, I don't care about this woman. I don't care about the guy. You shouldn't yell at little kids in general, but also parents should control their children. You shouldn't allow your children to mess with other people's belongings. That's your fault. Why were you allowing your 5-year-old to rifle through this woman's diaper bag? Anyway, or you should be watching your kids. This whole incident and why it's dangerous is because what you saw, we talked about it a couple weeks ago, this Carmelo Anthony situation where there's a black teenager, stabs a white teenager to death at a track meet. And then he raised hundreds of thousands of dollars. His family starts a GoFundMe, and they raise hundreds of thousands of dollars. Why? Because people think that it is somehow an attack on black people or blackness, that this kid is being prosecuted because the justice system is just against black people. And so black people donate to his GoFundMe, or liberals. I'm sure there's not all the money was raised just from black people, but liberals donate to his GoFundMe because they say, well, this kid's only being charged because he's black, and obviously that white teenager pushed him or something, and that meant he needed to be stabbed to death. And so they raise hundreds of thousands of dollars. They buy a new house, all this stuff. Well, what you saw is this woman now said the same thing. She said, hey, listen, I am now being targeted. I've been doxxed. My home, my job, all this stuff was leaked online. I need money for all these things, and I'm not a bad person, blah, 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 help me. And she's raised something like $700,000 in a give, send, go, whatever that website is, where you can donate to people. She's raised $700,000. Neither of these things is a good thing. Donating to Carmelo Anthony because he stabbed a teenager to death at a track meet is a bad thing. It's an immoral thing. You shouldn't be doing that. Donating to a woman because she's been doxxed, because Yes, she behaved like a moron. You shouldn't be yelling racial slurs at people in the street, especially children. Not that you should do it at adults, but you shouldn't be yelling at children in the first place. And you certainly shouldn't be yelling racial slurs at a child for misbehaving. Kids misbehave. 5-year-olds don't behave with malice, okay? That 5-year-old's not attempting to become a master criminal. They're just misbehaving because they're kindergartners. And so should this woman raise $700,000. On the other side of that, the little kid's family has raised $340,000. For what reason? Because someone yelled at him in the park? Why does anyone care outside of the people? Again, it's immoral to yell at children or yell racial slurs at children. I'm not saying you should never yell at children. Sometimes children misbehave. Sometimes children need to be yelled at and put in place. But not like this. It's not a moral thing. You shouldn't be giving money to a woman just because her life is bad because she said something she shouldn't have said. That's not a reason to raise money. And this kind of stuff just fuels this racial strife that we have in America. That is 99% artificially created by news stories like this. Go out in your life and just live in the world. How often are you confronted with people of other races who just treat you with disdain based on your race? Almost never. Most people are polite. Most people are pretty nice. But you're led to believe by the media that there's this constant battle between white and black and white and Asian or Asian and black. And the reality of the fact is that it is not true that in real life that's how it is. But stories like this make it seem that way because a woman who drops the N-bomb raises $700,000. And people will just use that as an example to say, see, this is how prevalent racism is in America. If a woman just says the N-word in public, she can raise over $500,000. That shouldn't be a story. It shouldn't be a real thing. It shouldn't be necessary. But also, it's possible that there are no good people in this circumstance. This woman, I'm not going to pretend. I don't know. She might be a good person. I doubt the kind of person who yells racial epithets in the street is a nice person, but I'm not going to pretend to judge her entire life. The guy, though, who's filming her on the other end of the camera, I guarantee he's not a good guy. This guy, he's a Somali immigrant. Okay, fine, whatever. Who's twice been brought up on charges for sexual misconduct. In 2023, he was in a case that it wound up getting dismissed, but it was dismissed not because he was innocent, but it was dismissed. This is a quote. What is the quote? In the interest of justice. That's the quote used in the court documents why they dismissed the case. Not that he was innocent, just that it would have looked bad to prosecute him. A couple years ago, he was he had charges brought against him for sexually assaulting a 16-year-old. But again, the charges were dropped because the accusation was taken away. They said they no longer wanted to prosecute. Again, not because he's innocent, but because they just dropped the charges. This guy is a bad guy. The woman's a bad guy. No, none of these people deserve hundreds of thousands of dollars for their actions. None of them. Neither person in this case. It is not clear. First of all, don't give this guy money. You should be deporting him. We don't need sexual deviance in this country. If you're going to be I don't know how old he is, but obviously he's old enough that he was brought up on statutory rape charges for a 16-year-old or sexually assaulting a 16-year-old, whatever the actual charges were. That's not the guy. And you shouldn't get money. You shouldn't get a reward for using racial slurs. So none of these guys deserve anything. And this ties in. This story ties in. Before we get into some more thoughts on this, it ties into the second thing I wanted to talk about, which is this topic too. Dave Portnoy and some college kids get into a fight. And if you don't know Dave Portnoy is the owner of Barstool Sports. He's a very outspoken guy, just a interesting dude all around. Barstool Sports, it used to be just a sports online periodical that they just kind of gave a bro take on sports. That's kind of how I would describe it. And they branched out. They do lots of podcasts now. I think they are gambling now, like a sports bet app. I'm not 100% sure on that, but they own also physical places too, physical sports bars. So Dave Portnoy owns this bar in Philadelphia, and there's a video that went around of some customers and two waitresses. They're holding up a sign. The sign says, again, pardon the language, but this is what it says. It says, "Fuck the Jews." Okay, that's what the sign says. And Dave Portnoy went ballistic, as rightfully so. He's Jewish, and He said he saw this and he said, he's going to find the people responsible. They fired the 2 employees who were put with the sign. They wound up, I think some of the kids wound up being doxxed. It turns out the kids, quote unquote kids, they're college age. They went to Temple University. They both were suspended. And again, they're raising money based on this incident. And I'm not going to read what the kids said, but basically it's like, Dave Portnoy has tried to ruin my life. He exposed me. He did this. We're just joking. I don't deserve this. I need money now. Please help me for education and for relocation purposes. All this nonsense. And after admitting that, yeah, I said it, you could say, listen, there are tons of things. Use Anthony Jeselnik as an example here. A comedian will say something that is outrageous or completely wrong, and you laugh about it because there may be just like a tiny hint of truth to it, but also you would say, no, you would never say that in polite company. That's why people laugh at jokes that are sexist or racist or I don't know. That's why people make dead baby jokes, or why people make jokes about the Holocaust. Like, people make jokes about offensive things, okay? And they're funny sometimes. Like, jokes can be funny because you hear a joke and you go, whoa, that's crazy, that's outrageous, can't believe someone would say that, and that's part of the joke, okay? I'm not going to explain humor to you, but you cannot. What's the joke with the sign that says F the Jews? What's the joke? I don't understand the joke. Like, Anthony Jeselnik would do a joke, and it's offensive, or it's this, but there's humor in it because it's got a punchline, or it's got a twist, or it has something. Like, there's a joke there. Even if you don't think the joke is funny, there is a joke. What's a joke about the sign? Is the joke just that you said something so outrageous, like F the Jews, that it's funny because what? Because we don't like Jews? Like, what's the point? And I don't understand. So the kids initially, they copped to it, and then they lawyered up. Dave Portnoy gave a great, great, great response to this. I'm going to read it because I love it so much. He basically said, this is a quote. He said, quote, talking about one of the Temple University kids. He said, quote, "This dude is a flat liar. I talked to him on the phone with his buddy, and they both owned up to it and cried about it. He then lawyered up after speaking with his family. His name came out because he's a moron and uploaded the F the Jews sign to his Instagram before I even knew about it. He already went viral without me. He spreads hate and uses the conflict in the Middle East as his excuse, and did it in a bar with my company's name on it. Now he's trying to profit from him. I'm sure he'll make money because there's lots of anti-Semitism in the world. Regardless, this is the least surprising thing ever. He is the definition of a coward, zero accountability for his actions. I don't care what religion you are or how you feel about the Middle East. This was an act of pure hate and should disgust you." I love that, end quote. I love that quote because it's exactly right. It's the difference. People always talk about this because I initially came up talking and writing about things, dealing with cancel culture. This was my bugaboo. Talking about college campuses when I was a college-age kid and how I hated the fact that they were deplatforming speakers or trying to use the heckler's veto. This was my thing. And so when people talk about cancel culture, they say, well, Dave Portnoy is participating in cancel culture. And I say, no, he's not. As somebody, again, this is free speech is my thing. This is not cancel culture. This is just accountability. People get this confused. And they even did back in the heyday when we were talking about cancel culture all the time. Cancel culture has never meant that you are not going to be held responsible for your actions. If you say something that is racist or bigoted in any way, anti-Semitic in this case, if you say something like that, it doesn't mean that you're not accountable for your actions. It's not a defense of racial slurs. What it was a defense of was talking about ideas and keeping the Overton window expanded. So what that meant is you shouldn't deplatform people like Alan West or Dinesh D'Souza or Donald Trump. You shouldn't keep these people from public light because you say their policies are bad or they're racist or blah, 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 blah. It wasn't a defense of people walking around screaming hate speech at people. By the way, hate speech is a stupid, stupid term that has no legal basis whatsoever. This idea that we're going to investigate hate speech as a crime, it's not a crime. It's ugly. You shouldn't do it, but it's not a crime. It never has been. It's not unconstitutional to say things that are bad. It was never a defense of that. It was never a defense of the woman in the park yelling the N-word or the people holding up an F the Jews sign. That's not what it is. So it's a confusing thing because now they're saying Dave Portnoy, this guy, is participating in cancel culture. No, he's not. Saying, hey, guy, you're anti-Semitic, that's bad, is not the same as saying we shouldn't talk about, you can't make a blanket statement about people and expect it to be true. So everyone wants to accuse Republicans of being racist or xenophobic or Islamophobic, which is, again, is another dumb word. But that's unproductive and it's ridiculous and it's just wrong on its face. And I think that that's not what is happening when you say, hey, this lady in the park, if someone fired her from her job because she called a little boy the N-word, would I be upset about this? No, you shouldn't do that. That's not the way people behave. Holding up an F the Jews sign, it's not commentary. That's not an idea. That's not a debate. That's not a discussion. That's just stupid and wrong and anti-Semitic. And if these kids get suspended from temple, is that cancel culture? No, that's just, you shouldn't say stupid things. You shouldn't do these kind of things that are just hateful to other people. Yelling at somebody about ideas. So, for example, people will say this. If you talk about facts, like if you talk about the black community and you talk about there's a problem with violence or there's a problem with single motherhood and there are these issues, cultural issues in the black community that need to be changed. Some people will just throw things at you. They'll just say, oh, you're racist, you're bad, you're bad. If the lady in the park had just sat down and wanted to have a discussion about criminality in black neighborhoods or something like this, you'd say, okay, well, let's hear what she has to say. That's not what she was doing. She was just using hateful rhetoric towards a child. That's not the same thing as what we're talking about. We're talking about cancel culture. When we're talking about cancel culture, we're talking about I invite someone to speak to my university or my business or whatever it is, and other people want to not allow that person to speak. That's cancel culture. I'm not saying anyone doesn't have a right to speak, but you don't have a right to keep your job if you're a hateful bigot. Like, I don't think that that's true. I don't think that polite company should be out there using racial slurs about anyone. And by the way, I think that applies if you're bigoted against white people because, yes, racism against white people is a thing. You can't just be hateful to groups of people. I think that's ugly in every case. So the idea, fighting cancel culture, was all about just keeping the Overton window as wide as humanly possible. I don't think it should extend to people who walk around and scream racial slurs at children. I think that that's a fine cutoff point. But you have to be able to talk about ideas and people, and you can't deplatform people because you don't want to hear them speak. By the way, if someone invited that lady to speak at a college university, I wouldn't say she shouldn't be allowed to come. I don't know what she has to say. I don't know anything about her. The same with the other guy. If you want to invite the Somali immigrant pedophile to come give a talk at the university, hey, that's your right. You can do that. I probably won't show up for that talk, but I'm not going to try and cancel you from being able to hear people speak. That's what cancel culture is. It's trying to stop other people from speaking because you don't like them. That's not what I'm trying to do with anyone. That's not what Dave Portnoy is trying to do. Dave Portnoy is trying to say, hey, moron, yeah, you have the right to say F the Jews. You don't have the right to do it in my establishment because this is my business and you're slandering my name as a business owner because it's attached to this. And guess what? Everyone's going to know who you are because you said it. And hey, if you want to say it, you want the freedom to say it, you have to have the freedom to stand behind it. And if you don't, you're a coward and you're running away from it and you should come out and apologize. And that's fine too. If this lady, by the way, in the park came out and she said, hey, listen, here's what happened. Someone was stolen. In a moment of weakness, I said something. I don't know why I said it. I shouldn't have done it, blah, 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 blah. You give her grace. Allow her. Okay, yeah, I forgive you. Not that it's my business to forgive someone for a slight that wasn't against me, but I'm not going to hold it against you. If you come out there and you show humility, you grant those people grace. But that's not what's happening. Instead, you double down and you say, yeah, they're just trying to get at me. Give me $700,000 so I can move to a nice house. It's ridiculous. Why are we doing this? Why do we engage in this? It makes no sense. People don't give money to people. And also just be nice. What the hell? Why is it so hard to just be nice to people in person? Like, I don't understand that at all. And really, I'm hoping eventually we just get past this. You would think the Democrats would learn. They have lost people because of this issue. Hey, look at me. I never got on board with Black Lives Matter. It was a split between me and the Democrat Party because I looked at the Democratic Party and I said, they no longer represent what I think on this issue, which became a gigantic issue. Racial politics throughout the 2000s have been a gigantic issue. And I said, they no longer really represent my views. And I think demonizing police, which the Democrats did quite a bit of, I never got on board with that because I work with the police. And I say, most of these guys are just really nice people who are trying to do a job that is very difficult. They're not racists. They're not walking around trying to oppress people. They don't get on and put on their vest and their belt and they go, hey, let's go oppress some minorities today. That's not most cops. Okay, I actually don't know any cops who really live like that. So I know a lot of cops. So I never really, that was a split with the Democrat Party. And I hope that they learn that these kind of stories are not helping. They don't make things better. The media is not going to learn. You would think that they would too, but stoking racial strife in America gives them ratings. That's controversy sells, and the corporate media is only interested in selling advertising. That's what they're doing. They're not trying to make America a good place. They're not trying to make it better. They're not trying to heal or help. What they're doing is stoking racial tension like they do with all these conflicts, because controversy sells advertising, which is the goal of the news, the corporate press. They are not there to educate. They're not there to inform. They're not there to help make anything better. They're there to sell advertising revenue because they are a business. Anyway, we're going to move on because we could rant about this kind of stuff all day, and it's been long enough. Anyway, let's just do a quick one. Topic 3, new pope, who dis? We have a new pope, people. This is big news. This is exciting. It's the first pope born in America. I was trying so hard. There's other things that you just want to say when you're talking real fast. And it's the first pope born in America. Prior to a couple of days ago, he was Cardinal Robert Prevost. I've heard it pronounced Prevost and Prevost. There's an E in there, so I'm imagining his name is Prevost, although I have heard some people in the news calling him Prevost, so I'm not 100% sure. But he is a cardinal, 69 years old. He's originally born in Chicago, but he spent much of his life in South America. He was ordained in 1982, but he moved to Peru 3 years after that and lived there for many years in Peru and South America doing priestly work in South America. So a lot of people are saying, well, he's kind of like another South American pope, but not really. He isn't the first pope born in the U.S. That's a big deal. So he took the name of Pope Leo. He's Leo the 14th, and he's going to be the 267th pope that we've ever had. He's been described as a centrist, but I don't know. I think when you're really looking at him, this is going to be a continuation of Pope Francis, the more liberal ways that have been going on for the last decade. 80% of all the cardinals that got to participate in the conclave were appointed by Francis. So the idea that we weren't going to get another pretty liberal pope seemed very slight, because Francis had the benefit of appointing all the cardinals. The cardinals are the ones who vote for the pope. That's just the way it goes. Leo the 14th said that in his first speech, he was going to continue to reach out to the poor, the immigrants, the marginalized groups. Again, this was what Pope Francis was known for. He was known for his work with the poor and what they call marginalized groups. I think that the Catholic Church has a problem, because the reality is I think you would find it difficult. If I was a full, very faithful, very believing Catholic, I would have a hard time voting for the Democratic Party in America. That was just me. I don't know how people square that circle, because the Catholic Church teaches some very specific things, and the Democratic Party does not follow those things whatsoever. They do not adhere to Catholic faith. This pope, in particular, has called out J.D. Vance in the past. I think one of his last tweets that he did, it's weird to say that the pope is out there tweeting, but as a cardinal, he said this on Twitter, or X. He said, quote, J.D. Vance is wrong. Jesus doesn't ask us to rank our love for others. So directly criticizing the vice president of the United States, now you're the pope, it's not a good look. I think the pope would do well to stay out of politics as much as possible. You can preach whatever you'd like, but don't weigh in on specific things and don't talk about specific politicians. I think that does a disservice to the Catholicism when the pope weighs too heavy in on this stuff. And so you got to avoid this, because first of all, I think it's weird that the Pope is saying something that is wrong. Technically, it's not wrong. Jesus himself didn't say we had to rank our love for others, but it's absolutely Catholic teachings that have taught us that there is such a thing as ranking love for others. This was all in response to J.D. Vance talking about the Odor Amoris, which is Latin for order of love. And basically, this idea, it comes from Thomas Aquinas. It's actually a little older than that, but it was basically summarized perfectly by Thomas Aquinas in the Summa Theologica, and basically talked about how there is an idea, a hierarchy of love in this world that it is a Christian's duty to follow. Kind of a summary of it. And it basically goes love of God, love of self, love of family, love of community, love of the world. And that's kind of the order as we understand it. And so the idea is that the Pope, now the Pope, at the time a cardinal, was arguing with J.D. Vance about something that he just seems wrong about. And it's hard to believe that a cardinal of that ranking would be uneducated on the Ordo Amoris. Ordo Amoris. There we go. Man, Latin gets you sometimes. And it's hard to believe that he wouldn't be familiar with Thomas Aquinas, one of the greatest Christian thinkers of all time. It's hard to believe that he wouldn't know this. So weighing in on politics to obfuscate what J.D. Vance was trying to say just because you don't like the Republican politics in the country seems weird. There are better American popes. I would have hoped for Robert Barron to be elected pope. That would have been really cool. Or, what was his name? The cardinal from Africa. I forget his name. He was one of the front runners. He also would have been a good choice. This guy wouldn't have been my first choice. But, who knows? We'll never know where he'll go. Obviously, they call him a centrist, but I don't think so. I think he's going to continue to go down the wrong path that Pope Francis led the Catholic Church down. You never know. You can kind of tell by the name that he chose, Leo, because the last pope named Leo the 13th, he wrote in the late 1800s, he wrote a paper called what is it called? Rerum Novarum, I think is the Italian or the Latin for it. Let's see here. I wrote it down somewhere. Rerum Novarum, which was basically a document that called for fair wages, safe working conditions, the rights of workers to belong to trade unions. It was basically a very socialist, pro-socialism document. So you can kind of see, based in the name choice even, where he leans politically. I think it would be wise, again, for the Pope to do himself a favor and don't weigh in on politics as much. I do not believe that Catholic teaching and leftist leanings go hand in hand together. I think to do that, you have to kind of be a bad Catholic. I don't know how to say it. You can't support abortion and say you're a good Catholic. I do believe that's true. I think the Pope himself has said so. I do not see how you square those circles. And if you're going to support the Democratic Party, which believes in abortion up to 9 months, then I do not know what you're talking about when you say you're a good Catholic and a good Democrat. It doesn't make sense to me. I wish the Pope luck. I hope that he's great at his job. I hope that he's healthy for a long time. I hope everything's well. All we can do is see. You never know. Anyway, we're going to leave it there for the week. As always, questions, comments, concerns, leave them down below, and I will catch you guys next Friday.